How's it going, everyone? It's me, been a while, and yesterday I ran into this one video by a channel called Mr. Cap, where he basically talks about how DBD has a fun issue, and I found it to be a very interesting video, and I wanted to kind of analyze it and have a discussion with him along with you guys as well. So I'm not gonna drag it on too much. It's gotten a lot of negative views, and I kind of want to say my opinion on it, with obviously staying respectful. So let's just get into it and see what it's about real quick.
Dead by Daylight has a fun problem. I first played Dead by Daylight in 2018, and back then, it was a fun game to play and mess around on. Sadly, I deleted most of my clips from back then, but I got pretty good at the game, unlocked all the perks, and had hundreds of hours 316 killers and playing with friends. I eventually went on a hiatus from Dead by Daylight, but I was still invested into the game, played it from time to time, and kept up with any recent news and updates for the game. Although I originally stopped playing because I wasn't having as much fun, I still enjoyed the game and it served as a good replacement for me when the game Friday the 13th, a game I was essentially a pro in, died out. I got more interested in Dead by Daylight with all the game changes and finally got back into it. Throughout the course of getting back into Dead by Daylight, fighting the newer killers like the Skull Merchant, the Knight, and Pinhead, looking at all the new perks and going against them, I started slowly disliking the game and becoming frustrated at it.
I can see what he means by this. Obviously, he hasn't fully expanded on what he's saying right now, but overall, so far, I think a lot of people did not like the gen perk meta and the gen kick meta and the gen stalling killers like Skull Merchant Knight, especially. Yeah, overall, yeah, I can see why people don't like it.
I would finally enter a match and see it was a Skull Merchant or a Knight, and simply sigh knowing what was ahead of me. Absolute pain.
I do agree with that. Most of the time, when you go against those two particular killers, on Knight it's been less apparent recently, but on Skull Merchant it's still very, very apparent almost every time I go against her. They still go for the 3-gen playstyle, which is kind of odd because there aren't that many, like the gen perks that existed are no longer that strong. Overcharge got nerfed, Colubrine got nerfed, Eruption got nerfed, so all those gen kick perks, yeah, they're not really as strong as they used to be. Before, obviously it thrived because that was the new meta, but now it died out, but players are still playing like it because the power itself is very gen-oriented.
Almost every game I entered, I would dread fighting against most killers because I had finally realized something. The game is not bounced around fun anymore.
I think I think behavior is overall trying to balance it around fun, but it's also trying to balance it around people that, understand how to play the game, which means they're trying to fully balance it on the technical level. So something like Adrenaline is probably going to see a change in the future, hopefully, because it's such a strong perk and it's been in the meta for so long that overall, and it's so strong that it's been used over the course of 7 to 8 years, however long this game's been up for. So yeah, overall, I do understand what he means with this.
So many of these mechanics embedded into Dead by Daylight are now almost strictly to make one side or the other powerful, rather than something interesting to interact or play with. Unless the killer is absolutely brand new, you will typically have a very hard time keeping up with the game, especially if you're playing with randoms, which I do most of the time. The constant item nerfs that were the only thing keeping random teams from staying alive, to the now oppressive generator perk builds and generator protector killers being added that make doing the sole objective absolute torture.
I understand where he's coming from. Solo queue. Every survivor says that solo queue is pain, and I do understand that the lack of information, the lack of communication, killers being overwhelming because they did get quite a few buffs ever since the 6.1.0 patch. Like there have been a lot of patches where they've been buffing a lot of things and nerfing a lot of survivor items, but still. Like the game is not in the properly fully balanced state. If any half coordinated Swift team is to hop on a game, almost any killer is going to have a really hard time unless they just go for flashy saves the whole time, which is practically a free win. So most of the time, killers are when you're playing against Swifts. they struggle, but when you play against solo queue players, of course it's going to be easier because they lack information even after the UI changes. I don't agree with this. I'm just going to say it right off the bat. Deadlock has been one of the most balanced and fair perks ever since it got released. It didn't get changed once, I think. Colubrine got nerfed, as you can see. He put up a picture up here saying Colubrine's regression is 125%. Pain Resonance got heavily nerfed. Heavily got nerfed. You can now only use it 4 times. And even though it is 25%, I still think it is a big, big nerf to the perk. It was one of the most fair perks, and now it's just a mediocre but half decent perk. Merciless Storm, I don't know why he put up a picture of Merciless Storm. I'm pretty sure anyone with semi-okay reaction time is able to do these skill checks. Nowhere to Hide is one of the fairest and strongest actually perks for killer that aren't gen regressing, so I understand what he's trying to get at. He's trying to get at, oh, they kick it when Nowhere to Hide, Colubrine, Overcharge, Pentimento, Deadlock, blah blah blah, but I've rarely ever seen those types of players. I think he might just put this I think he might have just put these pictures up to prove a point rather than, actually complain about something and give a proper example. I'm not here to like insult or anything, but that's what I'm getting from this because I've never seen someone point and put Merciless Storm and complain about it basically. Knight, yes. Skull Merchant, yes. But the new Killer Singularity, I also don't agree with. The new Killer Singularity actually gets punished if he tries to guard gens. He is actually a more chase-oriented killer because you cannot slipstream off a gen the whole time because they're just gonna EMP. And even though EMPs did get nerfed, EMPs are still pretty fucking strong. And you're almost always gonna have it on you. So, until people get used to it, of course, it's going to be hard to get used to it because the killer just got released a couple days ago. But overall, the killer is very, very well made. Very well designed, in my opinion. He might look a little bit weird, but I think the killer is amazing. I think he's genuinely great.
Completely hopeless most of the time. The knight uses their power, and well, now I can't do anything for 20 seconds. And if the killer himself chases you as well, you might as well already be in the grave.
If he means by gens, because here he showed footage of him placing a guard near a hook, which essentially does nothing because even if you go to the hook and touch the survivor on hook for like a split second, it'll disable the knight, not knight, the guard. So that does nothing, but if he means by gens, then yeah, that is very annoying, and that is why people don't like knight, because you can just place a guard and then you can't do anything for like 16 to 24 seconds, depending on what guard he's using. I can't speak. If he means if a guard is chasing you and the killer is chasing you at the same time, close to you, then yeah. Most of the time, this is why a knight is a great zoning killer, which is also why survivors don't like going against him, because it's nothing too skilled, unless you're able to predict the survivor from afar. Basically, you just place your power down on one side, go to the other. If the survivor runs into it, you try to go and cut him off on a different end to result that in a hit. But the knight has no mobility and little to no gen pressure unless he's on a smaller map. So there are downsides to this killer. It's just, I understand it can be overwhelming in a chase, which is why people complain about it most of the time. And the Gen 3 gen thing as well.
The Skull Merchant places a drone, and well, good luck doing any of the objectives, and even when you counter the ability correctly, she has a radar to know exactly where you are.
The radar, aka the claw trap, I think it's called, is nothing too special, to be honest. The good players in this game are actually more favored when they do have a claw trap on them, because the Skull Merchant might go to them, actually. And you have to understand that Skull Merchant is just a basic M1 killer, 115. She cannot do much. She doesn't have any super big ability unless she's using the two, very strong add-ons, the purple add-ons, the one that reveals your aura and the one that slows you down when you're in the proximity, or the other that gives her a boost if she's in the radius of the drone. So there are a couple of add-ons that make Skull Merchant an actual chase killer, but overall she is not a chase killer at all. So having a claw trap on you, unless you're Deathhook, should not be an issue, honestly.
Combined with some ridiculous add-ons, most not even being ultra or very rare, you get a killer that is not fun to face against.
The first add-on is blindness, which can be annoying, but I don't really think it's anything bad. Like, why is this bad? I don't understand. Blindness for 15 seconds linger after leaving the area of effect, so he might be talking about when you enter the radius to disable the drone, you get blindness, and then 15 seconds more, but why does that matter? I don't really understand why that's an OP add-on or overtuned add-on. The suppressing of the skill checks is basically Huntress Lullaby at 5 stacks, which honestly doesn't, like, just disable the drone. I don't know. It's a bit weird. Unless he's talking about when he's injured and then the drone exposes you for a long time, but then you get killer instinct, so you still should disable the drone. I understand, it's a very annoying killer to go against, but there are some counters to her if you're coordinated. And you did say that you are in solo queue, which makes sense. Most of the time, Skull Merchant is going to win when she's going against solo queue players because you need to be coordinated against the killer, even if the killer himself or herself, you know, are not that high tier. Like if Skull Merchant isn't high tier, which she isn't, you still have to be coordinated against her because, like Knight, she has a 3-gen ability that is very annoying to go against and can and probably will result in your whole team giving up or dying because they made a mistake. So it's a killer you have to be very careful against, but overall, it's not a killer that is that hard to go against unless they're using some pretty good add-ons. Then they go up a few tiers. But yeah, the shotgun speakers are fine. There's nothing bad about them. I don't really understand why that's an issue. The infrared upgrade. Why is that an issue? I don't understand. It's a 4-second aura read, and it's after your claw trap disappears. That I don't know. That's a bit weird. And brown noise generator. Oblivious. I can understand why that can be annoying. I can get that. I understand that. But that is why you go and disable the drone. So, I don't know. If he brought up the 2 purple add-ons, then maybe that would have made sense, but I don't know. I don't know why he brought these up.
And while you might say this is all just me complaining and being a baby, then, well, you'd be partially right. But the problems don't even stop there. The map selection makes the game so RNG dependent on whether or not you'll lose or win, and there's almost no consistency when it comes to map balance. Behavior just seems to make whatever the hell they want and expect people to enjoy or be fine with anything they add. No, I don't want another inside map for the 6th time, please.
There are 4 indoor maps in this entire game. I'm really not sure where he was going with this. I understand that he may not like the maps, how they play and how they look, but there are only 4 indoor maps. Raccoon City Police Department, Larry's, Gideon Meat Plant, and Silent Hill aka Midwich Elementary School. There are no other indoor maps, so I'm very confused with why he said this, but the past few maps that came out have been outdoor, all of them. So that is a bit weird. I don't know why he said that.
I've never played a game before that the map has such a drastic outcome on the match. Even in competitive games like Valorant and CSGO, it is more left up to the player to do well rather than the map determining a win or loss. But in Dead by Daylight, that is just not the case. You'll be at such a disadvantage solely because you got a ridiculously big map that most killers are going to suck in, or you get a super small 2-story map that makes you guess where the killer is at all times as a survivor.
I understand where he's coming from. Not a lot of people like indoor maps, and those are usually the ones that kind of favor survivors if they know what they're doing. Most of the times, like Larry's, which is my least favorite map because I'm a killer main, and I hate it as survivor as well, but most of the time, if I get Larry's, RPD, or Gideon, I just cry inside because those maps are very hard to combat. Those maps are really tough. The easiest one being RPD, and even RPD sucks, man. So there are a lot of maps that are very good for Survivor. Some are decent, And in my opinion, the only map that is truly killer-sided is Midwich. I don't think any other map is fully killer-sided. I think Midwich is the only case of it being a disadvantage for survivors. The loops themselves are bad. The clusterness and you not being able to tell where generators are is also very bad for you. So overall, Midwich is like the only indoor map that, or sorry, only map, in my opinion, that is good for killer. I understand Dead Dog is also as well, but the main building, if people keep going to it, is absolutely just annoying to go up against unless you're playing Nurse, Spirit, Blight. So yeah. Overall, there are a lot of maps that are just decent for you. There are a lot of maps that are amazing for survivors. So overall, I understand where he's coming from. If he was talking as from a killer's point of view, then maybe. But from a survivor point of view, there are a lot of maps that you can just use and abuse, man. I know sometimes you might get bad RNG, but most of the time you shouldn't. So whenever you do get decent to good RNG, make sure to use and abuse it, and you should be in a very good spot to win the game, unless the randoms you're going with are absolute dog shit. No offense, of course.
There's absolutely no consistency to the game whatsoever. This is not fun to play. Then there's the main objective, which has had absolutely no innovation whatsoever that makes the game a yawn fest, holding interact for 80 seconds straight. Scratch that, they have innovated the generators by increasing the time it takes to complete one from 80 seconds to 90 seconds. With such little change to the basic hold interact to repair objective of the game, it leaves a lot more to be desired.
As I said, if a knight camps with a guard, the guard does not do anything. It's basically just an M1 killer that you're going up against camping. So if you wanna, you can trade. Or he can just grab you, which is why, in my opinion, grabbing as you're healthy shouldn't be a thing. So, yeah.
This is probably the least of my worries, however, because the add-ons for both Survivor and Killer are an absolute mess. Half the add-ons for Survivor are never used seriously. Some are completely unnecessary, some are completely useless, and some do barely anything worth bringing.
Yes, I agree with him on odd bulb rubber grip and leather grip. They are pretty unnecessary. On the second part, though, this is where we kind of run into issues. I think people overlook how good Styptic actually can be if it's in the right hands. Styptic is definitely not a bad add-on at all. I understand the rest of them because you put like instructions, which is a brown add-on, so I don't know why you're complaining about a brown add-on, but the yellow wire is honestly not even that bad for a yellow. I understand what you mean. You want something more powerful, and you don't want something to be bad in your eyes, but you have to understand different items have different effects, and overall, I think Styptic is still pretty strong if used properly. And I think the rest of the add-ons are fine as they are, to be honest.
The flashlight is a good example of some terrible add-ons. The only add-ons that do anything are the batteries and the filaments. To elaborate, increasing the brightness of a flashlight simply increases how bright the flash is from the killer's perspective, which is already unnoticeable since the killers will just look away from the flashlight regardless, and it doesn't decrease the time it takes to blind the killer. Increasing the accuracy does little to nothing, and increasing the width is also negligible and unnecessary.
I haven't touched those add-ons at all when I use flashlights, the width ones, so I'm not really sure if they're okay or not, but I'd rather just not touch them, to be honest. I understand you want everything to have some use, but to be honest, the wide lens, I don't understand why they exist. I don't understand the point of it, to be honest. Uh, maybe it's to kind of make people understand how flashlights work. I'm not sure. It's always been a weird add-on to me, and yes, some add-ons are a disaster, I get it. But there are some that are actually pretty good. Like the utility flashlight, I'm pretty sure it increases the duration of the blindness as well. So if you pair that up with the what is it called? With the Halloween add-on, not broken, is it broken bulb? I think it's called broken bulb or something. Broken bulb, odd bulb, you're gonna blind the killer for a very, very long time, and it's not gonna be fun to go against, so it does have some use. Blind duration already as is pretty long. It's like a second and a half. So increasing that by a pretty decent amount is always good for you to distract the killer and, you know, get away further. So.
The only stats that actually have somewhat of an impact for the flashlight currently are the battery, which adds more flashlight time, the filament, which does essentially the same thing, blindness duration, which the values currently aren't very worth it over batteries, and flashlight range, which only 2 add-ons do and are overshadowed mostly by the time extension add-ons. Again, it leaves a lot more to be desired. I also find it weird that they try to follow this 2 ultra rare add-ons per killer rule, but for Survivor, it's extremely inconsistent across the items.
Because there are 4 survivors in a match and there is only 1 killer, the point of playing killer is pressuring all 4 survivors in order to win, and overall, he is 1, you are 4. Therefore, you having less makes more sense than him having less. So, yeah, I don't really understand this point.
Regardless, survivors struggle with actual impactful good add-ons, while the killer can bring an uncommon add-on and completely change how to fight the killer. There are so many add-ons that you need to keep track of as Survivor that amateurs are going to suffer because of it. It already happens in public lobbies and when playing with friends. Dead by Daylight is supposed to be a casual game, but going against a killer nowadays is anything but casual in my book.
This is kind of where we run into an issue. I don't think Dead by Daylight is trying to be a casual game at this point. They're trying to balance the game, so the competitive scene, which has existed for years, is able to have actual balanced matches. As you're going to show later in the video, I'm not going to spoil too much, but you show how comp is and you understand why they're balancing it, right? That is where every single good survivor and every single good killer go, the best of the best, and if that is unbalanced, the game itself is unbalanced. You understand that, right? I understand that you mean the casual players that hop on are going to have a bad time because the game is very overwhelming for new players, and that is why a lot of people don't actually stick to playing Dead by Daylight, because going through learning every single thing before you even start liking the game can be difficult. It can be difficult. And if that's the conversation you want to have, then sure, that's the conversation you want to have. But I don't think Dead by Daylight is trying to hurt the new players. I think it's just trying to balance itself to have the most balanced experience, but the most fun experience as well. Because a balanced experience is also a fun experience in my eyes. Because the more chances you have to win, the more fun it'll be for you if you succeed.
Experienced players kind of take for granted knowing how to play against each killer and their knowledge of add-ons, because anyone not experienced is almost always suffering and losing on a consistent basis.
That is the point of Survivor. In low MMR, killer dominates because people don't know how to play against those killers. Even if it's Trapper, people are gonna not know how to play against any killer, so they're just gonna walk straight through grass, walk through tiles, nothing, like it's nothing, sorry, and they're gonna walk into traps. Against Wraith, since he's almost invisible, they're not gonna pay attention to the sound he makes, the little gurgling sound, plus they're not gonna look around them, so they are gonna fail because they themselves are bad players, and killer itself is easier in low MMR, as I explained, because of that. So, of course, it's going to be a losing experience for survivors when they first start, because they don't know anything. They are the weaker side in a chase, therefore they're going to go down very quickly. People are going to panic, they're going to let go of generators, they're going to try to reset, they're going to try to do all of these things, they're going to get scared, they're going to hide in corners and lockers, and that is where killers win. In normal games, not even like super high competitive MMR, players understand how to play. They understand everything, every add-on almost, they can call everything out if they're in the Swift. They understand how to play the game, which is why that is when it starts getting hard for the killer, because survivors already start understanding how to play against every single killer, and they can utilize everything, and sometimes they might make mistakes, and the killer might win because of it, but most of the time, killers are going to have a very, very hard time. So I think that is where I wouldn't say you're wrong, but I think that's where you kind of overshadow how this game works on a basis, on a basic level. Sorry, not on a basis.
It's why these newer killers, like Skull Merchant and the Knight, with oppressive base kits when taken advantage of, are going to absolutely mop the floor with amateurs, and that's not even considering add-ons.
Skull Merchant's base kit is not overpowered at all. Neither is Knight's, unless you're using Call to Arms with Map of the Realm, or Call to Arms with some other add-on. Knight is not that hard of a killer to play against. You're just supposed to predict when he's going to place his guard down, and if he does, you just run away and go to another loop. Like, sometimes you cannot, and that is where he wins. But most of the time you can, which makes him a mediocre killer. So, overall, I don't really understand from what point of view he's speaking. I'm not really sure. He might be speaking from like a beginner's point of view, that it's oppressive because, yeah, everything is oppressive. Like every killer is oppressive to new players. It doesn't matter if it's Trapper, if it's Clown, if it's Skull Merchant, if it's fucking Nurse. Like it doesn't matter. Every killer is oppressive because new players don't know how to play against those killers. So I don't really know what he's talking about here.
Add-ons can turn a killer from being mediocre to one of the best killers in the game.
That is simply untrue. Wraith is not one of the best killers, even if you use the best add-ons. All-Seeing Blood, all it does is give you intel, which can be good. To be honest, it can be good, but overall, it's a strong add-on, but it does definitely not make him one of the best killers. I understand that combo is strong. Still, Wraith is supposed to be an ambush killer. So overall, I don't really understand this. You just split up, you play on decent maps, you drop a few pallets, you expect them, you play in the open a little bit, and if you're injured, you gotta heal. So medkits are really good against him. I don't really understand this point. If he brought something like, if he said something like, maybe Spirit. Spirit is already good as is, but with her add-ons, she gets much, much stronger and in the top tier. Battling Blight as well, so I am not really sure what he meant with this.
It makes each match as a survivor a roll of the dice on whether or not you'll get pummeled to the ground with add-ons like Black Incense, Rusty Shackles, Expired Batteries, and especially Tombstone and Tuft of Hair.
Black Incense is a very strong plague add-on, I agree with that. Rusty Shackles is also a very strong hag add-on, and then we get into Skull Merchant for some reason. This add-on is not very good. I'm just gonna tell you right now, it's not that good. Basically how this add-on works is this add-on makes you start with a claw trap, but it has 40% of the battery, making it last 20-something seconds because I'm pretty sure the duration of the claw trap is like 45 seconds, so I'm really confused why you put this add-on here. Tombstone and Tuft of Hair literally has one of the easiest counters in the entire game. Myers is easily one of the weakest killers, and unless he's using Tombstone Piece, you're gonna have an easy time against him. So I'm really not sure what the hell you were thinking with this. Let me explain it to you, basically. Judith's Tombstone, when combined with Tuft of Hair, makes it so Michael can Mori everyone without his Tier 3 going away ever, no matter if he Moris them or not. So, what is the counter to this? You go in a locker. If you go in a locker, he cannot do anything. He cannot pull you out and then Mori you. So you're just stuck there as a Myers, crying because for the past 10 minutes, you've been charging up your Tombstone and Tuft of Hair just for it to be shit on by a simple locker. So you can kind of understand where this goes to shit. So I'm really not sure. There are plenty of counters against plenty of add-ons, and the less counter there is, the more oppressive they are. I understand what you mean. Black Incense is an amazing add-on, and Rusty Shackles also. If you mention Compound 33, Mother-Daughter Ring, Yakuyoke Amulet, and blah blah blah, I would understand, because those are truly some of the most oppressive add-ons on Killer. And Corrupt Seal, or whatever the fuck it's called on Plague.
The biggest problem, however, is with this meta behavior is trying to support, because each game it's just Gen Perk, Gen Perk, Gen Perk, and then a perk that synergizes with Gen Perks.
Overall, if anyone after the nerf to these Gen Perks still uses them, I'm sorry to tell you, but they are a bad player. And if they are a bad player, and you don't win against the bad player, then I really don't know what to tell you. They're essentially wasting two perk slots here. Also, no it on Blight is just bruh. I don't know why you would use no it on Blight, but whatever. Call of Brine Overcharge used to be the most oppressive thing in the game, along with Eruption. Now that it's nerfed to the ground, you literally don't have to worry about it, man. Just do the gens. Maybe you mean Overcharge has like a hard skill check, which sometimes it can be hard, I understand that. But that's it, man. That is it. That is the only sort of regression this guy's ever gonna get. Like a slightly increased regression is literally gonna do nothing. Dead Man Switch has been one of the least used perks ever since Painraz got nerfed, so I really don't know what you're going on with this. Maybe you just took this as like an example, and Deadlock could be a thing, Corrupt could be a thing that you're talking about, in which case, yeah, Corrupt is a good perk, but it goes away after you down the Survivor. Deadlock is a good perk overall, just go on a different gen in the meantime, so there is always a counter to a perk. There is not, I think there is no single perk that a killer has that does not have a counter. So, I I might have just said something stupid that I cannot think of right now, but overall, perks are very easily countered. So yeah, I don't really know what the issue here is.
It's extremely boring, oppressive, and slows down the game to a crawl.
It really doesn't. Like the gen perks got so fucking heavily neutered, so heavily annihilated that using Columbine Eruption, sorry, Overcharge, literally does nothing for you. It legit does nothing for you apart from give you info from Call of Brian, which in my opinion was the thing that was supposed to get nerfed. So I don't know. If you mean Call of Brian giving info, Blight coming back, kicking Gen, doing the same thing over and over again, he is going to lose because he cannot be at 5 places at once. So if you all spread out, even if there were 3 of you, you should be fine. Like if he keeps doing the same thing over and over again, man, like it doesn't matter. He can just I don't know. He has to commit to someone at one point. So I really don't know what you mean with it slows the game to a crawl. It used to slow the game to a crawl. Now it doesn't. It doesn't do shit now.
It forces survivors to use their own gen perks to counteract the gen oppressive builds.
I don't think there are that many oppressive gen perks. From Killer apart from Corrupt, Deadlock, maybe that's it. I'm not really sure. I can't remember many more.
I know I had to switch to using perks like Prove Thyself and Hyper Focus to Gen Rush while always bringing off the record and borrowed time because these killers nowadays just camp hooks, tunnel, and stall the game with their Pain Resonance, Deadlock, Dead Man Switch, and if all else fails, no ed.
Oh boy. I'm sorry to tell you, man, but if you bring off the record Hyper Focus, Prove Thyself, and BT, I don't know why you bring BT. You could have brought something else like Adrenaline or Windows. But if you bring those perks and you keep losing and you blame it on the perks that the killer brought, I'm sorry, man, but that is just either your randoms being shit or you just being bad. I'm sorry, man, but I just gotta say it. Maybe you haven't played DBD in a while. I think you said you haven't played it in a while, and maybe you forgot how to play it properly, but playing Survivor really is not that hard unless you're going with teammates that are absolutely not that don't know anything, basically. So if you bring those perks, which in my opinion you could replace it with something else. You could instead of hyper focus, you can do something like bring a toolbox with BNP if you really want to gen rush that much, and then prove thyself with something else to protect you, like an exhaustion perk. But if you bring all of that and you complain about this, then it's kind of a double standard because Pain Res is not that oppressive of a perk. It can be used 4 times. Deadlock is not an oppressive perk. Go to a different generator. Deadman's is not an oppressive perk. You keep going and working on the generator. Noed is not an oppressive perk. It reveals itself within a 24-meter range after 30 seconds. So I don't know. I have no idea where you were going with this, man. I'm gonna be honest with you.
The amount of games in which at least one teammate was tunneled and camped to death is insane, and it happens almost every single game. Luckily, they're finally adding an anti-camping mechanic to DBD that will hopefully solve some of the issues, but we'll have to see to find out.
Sometimes you're gonna get people that obviously try to, play like that, play sweaty a little bit, tunnel camp. If they camp fully, do gens. If they don't camp and they just tunnel, do gens. Like there's a solution for everything when you play survivors. So I don't know. I think you're just maybe you're saying this because you don't find it fun to go against. In which case, yeah, I understand. It's very annoying to get a killer that tunnels you or camps you, especially if it's a Bubba, because you showed a clip of Bubba there. But I'm not, I'm not really sure, man. I don't know what the issue here is. If you're just saying it to say that it's annoying and that it's boring, yes, I agree. If you're saying it because, you think everyone's bad that does this and under no circumstance should a killer do it, then that's a bit of entitlement, but I'm not gonna reach for that because you didn't say that, so let's move on.
With all these issues I've been mentioning, you might think there would be a reason for all this oppression, and I believe there is. When you take a 4-man group of survivors that have thousands of hours in the game and are trying their absolute hardest, the killer typically doesn't stand a chance. Look at any competitive tournaments for Dead by Daylight, and you'll quickly see that killers are actually getting completely stomped and rarely achieve more than 4 hooks a match.
Yep, true. This is where you mentioned the competitive scene, which is literally like they have so many restrictions and they're still getting shit on. This is not to say the killers playing are bad. They are some of the best players that you can possibly think of. But there is little to nothing a killer can do most of the time. Especially if the odds are in their favor. Especially if the odds are in the survivor's favor, I mean.
This may come as a surprise for some people, but I think this perfectly explains the overarching problem with Dead by Daylight. Behavior seems to balance the game against the most favorable conditions for Survivor, which then leads to any team that isn't 100% efficient and great at the game to suffer against people that now play the most oppressive killers, perks, and add-ons that Behavior themselves added in to compensate for highly skilled survivors, or because it's what's most viable in the game currently.
This is kind of where we run into another issue. So, overall, the game is supposed to be balanced around the best of the best players because the best of the best players are able to play the best. That is why they fully exploit everything they possibly can. And in competitive, they're not even bringing anything too special. They're literally not even, they are restricted so much, especially survivors. They're restricted so much. But yet, killers still struggle. So you can kind of see what the issue here is. Like, unless killers are running in competitive, the best of the best, I'm talking Nurse, with the biggest gen builds, with the biggest tunneling, with the biggest whatever the fuck else you gotta do. Blight with Alka Ring, C33. Spirit with Mother-Daughter Ring, Yakuyoki Amulet. Like, there are so many... those oppressive add-ons and those oppressive killers are an issue. But the survivors themselves are an issue as well because, as you can see, and as you just said yourself, in competitive, they are getting shit on. The killers are getting fucking shit on. So, that is why Behavior understands that this game is not balanced at all. And your point being, oh, everyone that's not playing perfectly efficiently is going to lose, is simply untrue. Because when you look at it, if a strong killer goes against a strong squad, it's the same situation. There is nothing new happening. Because a strong killer, unless bringing really, really strong shit, is going to struggle because the strong survivors still know as much as he knows. So, you making a point that competitive players that you have to be perfectly efficient to win is simply untrue because it's the best of the best versus the best of the best. So if the same skilled player goes up against the same skilled players, it's gonna be the same situation. It doesn't always have to be the same, like the best of the best versus the best of the best. I think you kind of misunderstood that whole point. Oppressive killers being Skull Merchant is simply untrue. Spirit with certain add-ons, yes. And Plague with certain add-ons can be oppressive, yes. Mother-Daughter Ring, yes. Expired Batteries, no. Black Incense, yes. Not oppressive, but strong.
It explains why Survivor items are getting nerfed and add-ons are being mostly neglected. It explains the camping, the tunneling, the perk builds, the newer killers' gen-centric abilities, and other aspects of the game. I believe this is where most of the problems stem from, and I don't think making what would be considered a bad time for killer and giving it to survivors instead is the right choice. It only makes the game more oppressive.
That is single-handedly, I apologize in advance, but that is single-handedly one of the dumbest things I've heard in my entire life. Obviously, no offense, but you just said yourself, I understand that killers suffered for many and many years, but giving it to us survivors makes it more oppressive. No, you're still better than killers. After all of these buffs that killers received, killer is still worse. I'm sorry to tell you, but I'm not saying this as an opinion. I am saying this as a fact. Items are still busted. You neglected looking at toolboxes at all during this entire video to counteract your opinion. So toolboxes are like the biggest issue right now, which are probably going to be the next tool to rework, or sorry, item to rework. Hopefully, I fucking hope. But I understand there are only a few oppressive add-ons and there are only a few oppressive killers. But you all survivors, if you bring the best of the best, you're almost gonna win every single match you go in. Like, I really don't get that point, to be honest. That is one of the... No. That's just no.
Behavior is making it harder and harder for a casual game to actually be casual.
They're not aiming it to be a casual game anymore, I'm pretty certain. Because if they wanted it to be casual, they wouldn't be nerfing Dead Hard and balancing it. They wouldn't be rebalancing all of these other things, and they wouldn't be giving quality of life changes to Killer. It's like a PvP game at this point. It's genuinely, it looks like a PvP game. So, I don't think it's supposed to be a casual game anymore, I'm sorry to tell you.
There is plenty more to talk about and go more in depth with, but I think I've whined enough for now. This game deserves better, and I want it to succeed, so let's hope these new changes being added help the current state of the game.
Well, that was your video, and it was enjoyable to watch, but overall, I think there are a few things that I really dislike about your points, and there are a few things that are just wrong. I do understand where you're coming from, but as you start getting back into the game, you're gonna realize how much of an advantage you have, especially when you're in a lobby full of friends. So overall, man, good video. I'm sorry you're getting this much hate. It can be very sad. I know you publish a video and then it just gets a lot of hate. I hope that doesn't stay like that, but overall, there are some things that I disagree with, which is completely fine. Some things are factually incorrect, and some things are coming from a spot of you simply not having enough experience yet again to, you know, talk about it in a proper manner. So, overall, I hope you have a good day. I hope you guys have a good day. Thank you for watching. I hope this turns into a discussion in the comments that we can properly have a nice little talk about, but don't start arguing with people in the comments, please, if a lot of people start talking here. Overall, have a great day. I'll see you all later, and bye-bye.